14 famous R&B singers who lost everything to drugs. Addiction does not always begin in a dark alley. Sometimes it starts inside a dressing room after a brutal tour, or with one substance meant to silence pain. Then relief becomes dependence, dependence becomes secrecy, and secrecy begins taking everything: money, health, family, freedom, and sometimes life itself. Under the lights, these R&B legends looked untouchable. Their voices filled arenas. Their records sold millions. But behind the silk suits, gold plaques, and screaming crowds, some were hiding cravings, relapses, arrests, broken relationships, and private battles the industry often ignored until the damage became impossible to conceal. Today on Black Hollywood Uncut, we are pulling back the curtain on 14 famous R&B singers who lost nearly everything to drugs. Stay until the very last second, because the final stories carry devastating twists. Subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut and hit the notification bell. Whitney Elizabeth Houston, die age 48 in 2012. Whitney Houston did not simply sing songs. She made them feel larger than human life. Born into a deeply musical family in Newark, New Jersey, she carried gospel discipline into pop and R&B, combining technical control with an emotional force few singers could match. When her self-titled debut album arrived in 1985, the world witnessed the beginning of a crossover phenomenon that would break commercial barriers for Black female artists. Her voice-powered classics including Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, and The Greatest Love of All. Then came The Bodyguard. Her recording of I Will Always Love You became a global anthem, while the film's soundtrack won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year. Houston's beauty, elegance, and astonishing range created an image of near perfection. To audiences, she appeared untouchable, the voice every singer admired and almost no one could reproduce. But the image carried an impossible weight. Behind the applause, Houston faced relentless industry expectations, invasive tabloid coverage, relationship turmoil, and a publicly documented struggle with substance use. Her marriage to Bobby Brown became a constant source of media attention, often reducing two complicated people to a spectacle. Houston later spoke openly about drug use and entered treatment more than once. Her story should not be simplified into a fall caused by one person or one decision. Addiction develops through many forces, and public humiliation rarely creates the conditions needed for recovery. Houston attempted a major return with the 2009 album, I Look to You. Although years of strain had changed her instrument, moments of the old power remained. Fans hoped she had finally reached calmer ground. That hope ended on February 11, 2012, when she was found unresponsive in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, one day before the Grammy Awards. She was 48. Authorities ruled her death an accidental drowning, with atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use identified as contributing factors. The tragedy became one of music's most painful warnings, but it must never eclipse the artist. Whitney Houston changed how power, grace, gospel, and pop could exist inside one voice. Her final years revealed human fragility. Her recordings reveal something else entirely. When Whitney reaches the final chorus, the struggle disappears, the voice rises, and for that moment, she remains beyond reach. James Joseph Brown, die age 73 in 2006. James Brown did not walk onto a stage. He detonated across it. With razor-sharp rhythm, impossible footwork, and a voice that could command a band with a single shout, he transformed Black music and changed the architecture of popular sound. Born into extreme poverty in South Carolina, Brown rose from a troubled childhood to become the godfather of soul, building a career around discipline, endurance, and total control. Songs such as Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, I Got You, I Feel Good, and Cold Sweat helped create the foundations of funk. His music stripped rhythm down to its rawest elements, placing the groove above everything else. Later, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, became more than a hit. It became a declaration of dignity during a period when black identity was being fought over in streets, schools, politics, and media. His influence would spread through soul, disco, hip-hop, rock, and nearly every form of dance music that followed. But behind the precision of his performances was a life that became increasingly unstable. By the 1980s, Brown's public story was being shaped by substance use, legal trouble, financial pressure, and accusations of violence. Reports connected him to cocaine and PCP, substances that appeared during some of the most chaotic episodes of his later life. In 1988, he became involved in a widely publicized confrontation and police pursuit that led to a prison sentence. The incident became a symbol of how far the disciplined showman had fallen from the image of absolute command he once projected. Still, Brown refused to disappear. After prison, he returned to touring and continued performing with the same relentless energy that had defined him for decades. His later years remained complicated, and his personal life should not be softened or excused. Addiction may explain part of the instability surrounding him, but it cannot erase responsibility for harm or reduce his entire legacy to scandal. James Brown died on December 25, 2006, from heart failure associated with pneumonia. He was 73. His life remains one of the most difficult contradictions in music history. A man who gave rhythm freedom while struggling to control his own world. The darkness around his final decades is real. But so is the sound. Every breakbeat, every horn stab, every commanding shout still carries his fingerprint. Ray Charles Robinson Sr. died age 73 in 2004. Ray Charles heard possibility where other people heard boundaries. Gospel was supposed to remain sacred. Blues belonged to another world. Country, jazz, and R&B were treated as separate traditions. Charles pulled them together, reshaped them through his own experience, and created a sound so powerful that it helped define modern soul music. Born in Albany, Georgia, and raised in poverty, Ray lost his sight during childhood. His mother insisted that blindness would not become an excuse for dependence, teaching him to move through life with discipline and self-reliance. At the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind, he studied piano, composition, and musical arrangement. By the time he entered the professional world, he possessed not only extraordinary instinct, but the technical knowledge to control every part of a recording. During the 1950s and 1960s, songs such as I Got a Woman, What I Say, Hit the Road Jack, and Georgia on My Mind turned Charles into one of America's most important musical innovators. His phrasing carried the fire of the church, the ache of the blues, and the freedom of jazz. He crossed racial and genre barriers without softening the emotional truth inside his voice. Yet while his career was rising, Charles was living with a serious heroin addiction that lasted for many years. He later acknowledged that he began using the drug early in his professional life. The addiction resulted in arrests and placed his reputation, freedom, and health in danger. In 1965, after another drug-related arrest, Charles entered treatment and ended his dependence on heroin. His recovery was not a magical overnight transformation. It required withdrawal, accountability, and a decision to continue living without the substance that had followed him through much of his rise. What makes his story extraordinary is what came next. Charles continued recording, touring, and experimenting for decades. He brought soul into country music, influenced generations of singers, and earned major honors across his lifetime. Addiction remained part of his history, but it did not become the final definition of his life. Ray Charles died on June 10, 2004, from complications of liver disease. He was 73. His journey proves that redemption does not erase the past. It changes what the past is allowed to control. His darkness was real, but his music turned that darkness into something the world could hear, understand, and survive. Marvin Pentz Gaye Jr. died age 44 in 1984. Marvin Gaye sang as though every emotion carried a secret: desire, fear, faith, loneliness, protest. His voice could whisper across a love song, then rise into a cry for a wounded nation. Born in Washington, D.C., he entered Motown during the label's golden age and gradually became one of its most daring artists. But behind the elegance, tailored suits, and effortless sensuality was a man fighting battles that fame could not silence. Early hits, such as How Sweet It Is, Ain't That Peculiar, and his duets with Tammy Terrell made him a major star. Yet Gaye wanted more than polished romance. With What's Going On, he confronted war, poverty, racism, environmental damage, and spiritual exhaustion. The album changed the possibilities of soul music. Later, Let's Get It On and Sexual Healing revealed another side of him: intimate, vulnerable, and deeply conflicted. As his success grew, so did the instability around him. Gaye struggled with depression, financial problems, broken relationships, and heavy cocaine use. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, people close to him described increasing paranoia and emotional isolation. He briefly moved to Europe, hoping distance would bring clarity. In Belgium, he regained enough focus to create Sexual Healing, one of the most successful songs of his career. For a moment, the comeback looked complete, but returning to the United States did not end the turmoil. Gaye moved into his parents' home in Los Angeles, where the relationship with his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., remained tense and deeply damaged. On April 1, 1984, during an argument inside the house, his father shot him. Marvin Gaye died one day before his 45th birthday. He was 44. Cocaine was found in his system, but addiction was not the direct cause of his death. The official story remains one of family violence, unresolved trauma, and a final confrontation that should not be reduced to one substance or one moment. Marvin Gaye left behind music that still feels painfully alive. He asked what was happening to the world while quietly losing control of his own. His ending was tragic. His voice remains eternal. Billie Holiday died age 44 in 1959. Billie Holiday did not possess the loudest voice in jazz. She did not need one. She could bend a single word until it carried heartbreak, memory, and warning. Born Eleanora Fagan, she survived poverty, exploitation, racism, and violence before becoming one of the most influential singers in American history. Every scar seemed to enter the music, giving her performances an intimacy that audiences could not escape. During the 1930s and 1940s, Holiday transformed popular songs through timing, phrasing, and emotional restraint. God Bless the Child, Don't Explain, and Lover Man sounded less like performances and more like private confessions. Then came Strange Fruit, the haunting protest song about lynching in the American South. Singing it placed her in direct conflict with powerful institutions and made her voice part of a larger struggle against racial terror. Behind the artistic brilliance was a life shaped by trauma and substance dependence. Holiday developed a serious heroin addiction during the 1940s. Her relationships were often unstable, and some accounts describe partners who were abusive or involved in drug use. In 1947, she was convicted on a narcotics charge and served time in federal prison. The conviction cost her the cabaret card required to perform in many New York clubs, removing a crucial source of income while leaving the deeper causes of her addiction untreated. Despite those barriers, she returned to the stage and performed at Carnegie Hall. Audiences still came, because no one else could make pain sound so beautiful. But her health continued to deteriorate. Years of alcohol and drug use, combined with constant stress and inadequate medical care, weakened her body. In 1959, Holiday entered a New York hospital with severe liver and heart problems. Federal narcotics agents placed her under arrest while she was receiving treatment. She died there on July 17, 1959, at the age of 44. Billie Holiday's story is not merely a warning about addiction. It is also about a system that punished a suffering black woman more aggressively than it protected her.
Her life was short, but her influence became immeasurable. The authorities tried to control her body. They could never imprison the voice.
Chaka Khan, Kakadinar 3 age now. Chaka Khan's voice has always sounded larger than the room around it. Fierce, elastic, unmistakable. Born Yvette Marie Stevens in Chicago, she emerged during the 1970s as the commanding lead singer of Rufus, bringing raw gospel power into funk, soul, rock, and R&B. When she sang, the music did not simply rise, it caught fire. With Rufus, Khan delivered classics including Tell Me Something Good, Sweet Thing, and Ain't Nobody. Her solo career pushed her influence even further. I'm Every Woman, Through the Fire, and her groundbreaking version of I Feel For You turned her into an international star. Across more than 5 decades, she earned 10 Grammy Awards and influenced generations of singers who tried to capture even a fraction of her vocal freedom. But behind that power was a long and complicated relationship with substances. Khan has spoken openly about struggles involving alcohol, heroin, cocaine, and prescription medication. In her own account, drugs became a way to escape emotions she did not want to confront. That honesty matters. Her story is not based on anonymous rumors or a sensationalized downfall. It comes from a woman willing to acknowledge how survival, pleasure, pressure, and self-destruction became tangled together. Remarkably, the addiction did not erase her career, but it repeatedly threatened her health and stability. She continued recording and performing while privately fighting battles audiences could not see. In 2016, after the death of her close friend Prince, Khan entered an intensive rehabilitation program to address dependency on the prescription opioid fentanyl. She canceled scheduled performances and publicly stated that protecting her life and health had to come first. In later interviews, Khan did not pretend recovery had rewritten her past. Instead, she described the experience as a painful education, one that gave her emotional depth and forced her to understand what she had been trying to escape. Chaka Khan's story is not the familiar tragedy of a voice silenced too soon. It is the rarer story of a woman who walked through addiction, survived its darkest rooms, and returned still carrying the flame. The scars remain part of her history. But when that voice erupts, survival becomes the loudest note.
Sly Stone, die age 82 in 2025. Sly Stone imagined a future before America was ready to live inside it. As the leader of Sly and the Family Stone, he built one of the first major bands to place black and white musicians, men and women, together on the same stage as equals. Their music fused soul, rock, gospel, psychedelia, and rhythm into something explosive. It sounded like unity. It looked like revolution. Born Sylvester Stewart in Texas and raised in California, Stone first worked as a radio DJ, songwriter, producer, and multi-instrumentalist. By the late 1960s, songs such as Dance to the Music, Everyday People, I Want to Take You Higher, and Hot Fun in the Summertime had turned his band into a symbol of possibility. Their performance at Woodstock carried that vision to a generation searching for freedom, while their integrated lineup challenged the racial and gender divisions still dominating American culture. Then the brightness began to darken. Fame brought pressure, isolation, money disputes, fear, and growing substance dependence. During the 1970s, Stone became closely associated with cocaine and PCP use. Performances were missed. Recording sessions became unpredictable. Band relationships fractured. The hopeful sound of the 1960s gave way to the murkier atmosphere of Cohn's There's a Riot Going On, a masterpiece that seemed to capture both national disillusionment and the turmoil consuming its creator. As the years passed, Stone withdrew from public life. His addiction damaged family relationships, reduced his creative output, and helped transform one of music's brightest innovators into a figure surrounded by mystery. Reports later described financial hardship and a period living in a van. although his children emphasized that his final years became quieter after he reportedly stopped using drugs in 2019. Sly Stone died on June 9, 2025, at the age of 82. His family said he had battled chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and other health problems. Addiction shaped his decline, but it was not announced as the direct cause of his death. His life remains one of music's most haunting contradictions. He created songs about family while becoming separated from his own. He preached togetherness while disappearing into isolation. Yet the revolution inside his music survived. Every modern collision of funk, rock, soul, and hip-hop still carries an echo of Sly Stone, the genius who showed the world what unity could sound like, even while struggling to find peace within himself.
Etta James died age 73 in 2012. Etta James never sounded as though she were simply performing a song. She sounded as though she had survived every word of it. Born Jamesetta Hawkins in Los Angeles, she carried gospel, blues, jazz, rock and roll, and R&B inside a voice that could move from tenderness to fury without warning. Long before At Last became a wedding standard, Etta had already learned that love, pain, and survival were rarely separate things. Her professional breakthrough came during the 1950s with The Wallflower, an answer record that introduced her bold personality to rhythm and blues audiences. After signing with Chess Records, she recorded classics including All I Could Do Was Cry, Something's Got a Hold on Me, Tell Mama, and I'd Rather Go Blind. Her voice was not built around perfection. It cracked, pleaded, growled, and confessed. That emotional honesty made her one of the most influential singers of her generation. But the suffering inside the music was not theatrical. During the 1960s, James developed a serious heroin addiction. Drug dependence, unstable relationships, arrests, and financial trouble repeatedly interrupted her career. In her autobiography, she described stealing, forging prescriptions, writing bad checks, and manipulating people around her to keep feeding the addiction. These were not glamorous stories of rock and roll excess. They were the actions of someone trapped inside a destructive cycle that had begun to overpower nearly every part of her life. Court-ordered treatment and repeated attempts at recovery followed. Progress was not immediate, and relapse remained part of the struggle. Yet James eventually regained enough stability to rebuild her career. Beginning in the late 1980s, she entered a remarkable second act. She recorded acclaimed albums, won 6 Grammy Awards, received numerous blues music awards, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993. Etta James died on January 20, 2012, 5 days before her 74th birthday. She was 73. Her manager said she died from complications of leukemia. Her long history with addiction shaped parts of her life, but not announced as the cause of her death. Etta's story is not only about falling into darkness. It is about returning from it with the voice still burning. Addiction stole years from her. It never stole the truth inside the music. Robert Beresford Brown Sr., 57. Age now, Bobby Brown did not enter R&B quietly. He arrived with sharp choreography, restless energy, and the confidence of someone determined to break away from every expectation placed around him. Born in Boston, Massachusetts, Brown became famous as a teenage member of New Edition before gambling on a solo career that would help define the sound, attitude, and visual style of New Jack Swing. After leaving New Edition, Brown's second solo album, Don't Be Cruel, transformed him into one of the biggest entertainers of the late 1980s. My Prerogative, Every Little Step, Ronnie, and the title track mixed R&B vocals with hip-hop production, street fashion, and aggressive dance performance. His rebellious public image made him magnetic. It also created the impression that nothing could slow him down. Behind the success, Brown developed serious problems involving alcohol and drugs. He has spoken publicly about using marijuana, cocaine, and other substances during different periods of his life. Arrests, missed opportunities, legal trouble, and unstable behavior gradually became part of his public story. His marriage to Whitney Houston was examined relentlessly by tabloids and reality television, turning private dysfunction into entertainment for millions. The addiction story surrounding Brown and Houston must be handled carefully. Brown has offered his own version of how drug use developed inside their relationship, while other accounts differ. Neither person's struggle should be blamed entirely on the other. Both were adults facing complicated histories, enormous fame, and personal decisions. Addiction is not accurately explained by assigning one villain to a relationship. Brown entered rehabilitation more than once and has described sobriety as an ongoing process rather than a single victory. Recovery, however, did not protect him from unimaginable grief. Whitney Houston died in 2012. Their daughter, Bobby Christina Brown, died in 2015 after months in a coma. His son, Bobby Brown Jr., died in 2020 from an accidental overdose involving alcohol, cocaine, and fentanyl. Those losses became another painful chapter in a family repeatedly touched by substance-related tragedy. Now 57, Bobby Brown continues performing and speaking about recovery, responsibility, and grief. His story is not a clean redemption tale. The past cannot be erased, and survival does not cancel the harm caused during addiction. But Bobby Brown is still here, still confronting what happened, still carrying the names of those he lost. His legacy remains divided between groundbreaking music and painful consequences. A reminder that recovery is not about rewriting history. It is about refusing to let history write the final chapter.
Rick James died age 56 in 2004. Rick James did not simply bring funk into the 1980s. He dragged it through rock, punk attitude, street swagger, and theatrical excess, until it became something dangerous and unmistakably his own. Born James Ambrose Johnson Jr. in Buffalo, New York, he spent years moving through different bands and musical scenes before Motown finally gave him the platform to become the self-proclaimed king of punk funk. With records such as Give It To Me Baby, Mary Jane, and Super Freak, James created a sound built on heavy bass, sharp synthesizers, wild sexuality, and rebellious energy. His 1981 album Street Songs became his commercial peak and turned him into one of the era's most recognizable performers. He also wrote and produced for other artists, helping Tina Marie develop her early career and bringing a harder edge to Motown's changing identity. His music later became deeply embedded in hip-hop through sampling, most famously when Super Freak formed the foundation of MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This. But James's public image of limitless pleasure concealed an addiction that had been growing for years. Cocaine, crack cocaine, and other substances became central to a lifestyle that damaged his health, judgment, finances, and relationships. He described periods of extreme drug use in his own accounts, while court records documented serious violence committed during drug-fueled episodes. In the early 1990s, he was convicted in connection with assaults against 2 women and received a prison sentence. Those crimes must not be romanticized as rock star chaos. Addiction formed part of the context, but it did not remove responsibility for the harm inflicted. After prison, James attempted to rebuild his career. He released new music, returned to touring, and gained unexpected popularity with a younger generation through appearances connected to Chappelle's show. Yet decades of substance use and declining health had already taken a severe toll. Rick James was found dead at his Los Angeles home on August 6, 2004. He was 56. The coroner determined that he died from a heart attack associated with an enlarged heart. Pneumonia and the effects of multiple drugs were listed as contributing conditions, but authorities did not classify his death as a simple drug overdose. Rick James left behind one of funk's most complicated legacies. The music was fearless, The damage was real, and behind the flamboyant persona was a gifted man whose pursuit of excess eventually became stronger than his ability to control it. Charles Kent Wilson, 73. Age. Now Charlie Wilson's story could have ended beneath the streets of Hollywood, far from the arenas where thousands once screamed his name. Instead, it became one of R&B's most extraordinary survival stories. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilson grew up singing in church before joining his brothers Ronnie and Robert in the group that became the Gap Band. Together, they helped define the sound of late 1970s and 1980s funk. Wilson's powerful, elastic voice drove classics including Outstanding, You Dropped a Bomb on Me, Burn Rubber on Me, and Yearning for Your Love. His vocals carried gospel intensity over synthesizers, heavy bass lines, and dance floor grooves. The Gap Band's influence reached far beyond its original era. Hip-hop and R&B artists repeatedly sampled the group, while performers such as Snoop Dogg, Kanye West, and Bruno Mars later embraced Wilson as both a collaborator and a musical elder. But when the group's commercial momentum faded, Wilson's private life collapsed. He has spoken openly about years of cocaine and alcohol addiction. The substances gradually consumed his money, relationships, stability, and sense of identity. By the early 1990s, a man who had once performed before packed crowds was homeless on the streets of Los Angeles. He slept wherever he could and watched the music industry continue without him. His official biography describes this period directly. Addiction led to homelessness, before recovery opened the way to a second career. The turning point came through treatment and the support of Mahin Tat, a rehabilitation center counselor, who later became his wife. Recovery did not immediately restore fame, but it gave Wilson the foundation to rebuild. As a solo artist, he found a new audience through albums including Charlie, Last Name Wilson, and Uncle Charlie. His comeback brought Grammy nominations, major collaborations, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 2024, Wilson publicly celebrated 29 years of sobriety while reflecting on the streets where addiction had once left him homeless. His survival story gained another chapter when he revealed that multiple strokes temporarily left him unable to walk. After months of rehabilitation, Wilson returned to the stage in June 2026 and said his voice remained intact. Charlie Wilson's journey is not proof that recovery is easy. It is proof that destruction does not always receive the final word. He lost nearly everything, rebuilt his life piece by piece, and returned not as the man he had been, but as a living reminder that a second act can become greater than the first.
Ike Turner died age 76 in 2007. Ike Turner's place in music history begins long before the headlines that later consumed his name. Born Izzy R. Luster Turner Jr. in Clarksdale, Mississippi, he became a band leader, pianist, guitarist, songwriter, arranger, and producer, whose early recordings helped shape the transition from rhythm and blues into rock and roll. The 1951 recording, Rocket 88, credited to Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats, but created with Turner's band, is frequently described as one of the earliest rock and roll records. During the 1960s, Turner built the Ike and Tina Turner Revue into one of the most explosive live acts in popular music. With Tina Turner at the center of the stage, the group delivered relentless performances and recordings including River Deep, Mountain High, Nutbush City Limits, and their celebrated version of Proud Mary. Ike controlled the arrangements, rehearsals, touring operation, and studio production. The result was powerful. The environment behind it was far darker. Turner later acknowledged a long dependence on cocaine. His addiction intensified during the 1970s and affected his health, career, finances, and behavior. Tina Turner's memoir and later public accounts described years of physical and emotional abuse during their marriage. Those allegations became central to how the public understood Ike Turner, and they should not be minimized or excused by addiction. Substance dependence may provide context for instability, but it does not remove responsibility for violence. His career collapsed under the combined weight of drug use, legal trouble, and public condemnation. In 1989, Turner was convicted on cocaine-related charges and served time in prison. After his release, he attempted to rebuild his life and music. He returned to recording, performed again, and won a Grammy Award in 2007 for the blues album Risin' with the Blues. The comeback showed that his musicianship had survived, but it could not erase the suffering associated with his past. Ike Turner died at his California home on December 12, 2007, at the age of 76. The San Diego County Medical Examiner ruled that cocaine toxicity caused his death. With hypertensive cardiovascular disease and pulmonary emphysema listed as significant contributing conditions. His legacy remains deeply divided. He helped build the foundations of modern music, yet caused harm that became impossible to separate from the art. Ike Turner's story is not simply about genius destroyed by addiction. It is about how talent, control, abuse, and self-destruction can exist inside the same complicated life.
Bobby Womack, die age 70 in 2014. Bobby Womack sang as though every promise had already been broken. His voice was rough, intimate, and lived in, a sound shaped by gospel churches, hard roads, complicated love, and decades of survival. Born Robert Dwayne Womack in Cleveland, Ohio, he began singing with his brothers in a gospel group that later became the Valentinos. Under the guidance of Sam Cooke, they crossed into secular music and recorded "It's All Over Now," a song later turned into an international hit by the Rolling Stones. Womack became one of soul music's most versatile figures. He worked as a guitarist, songwriter, producer, and solo performer, contributing to recordings by artists including Aretha Franklin and Wilson Pickett. Songs such as "That's the Way I Feel About Cha," "Woman's Gotta Have It," "Across 110th Street," and "If You Think You're Lonely Now" carried emotional honesty without polish or protection. He could sound wounded, seductive, angry, and wise within the same verse. But Womack's private life was marked by grief, scandal, and severe cocaine addiction. During the late 1970s and 1980s, he described periods of using cocaine, alcohol, marijuana, and pills for days without sleep. The dependence damaged his finances, health, relationships, and ability to maintain a stable career. He later connected some of that behavior to emotional emptiness and personal loss, but he did not portray addiction as glamorous. It was isolating, expensive, and destructive. His reputation also suffered from personal controversies, including his marriage to Sam Cooke's widow, Barbara, only months after Cooke's death. Those events often overshadowed his musicianship, leaving Womack respected by other artists, but denied the consistent mainstream success his talent might have earned. Still, his career refused to end quietly. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009 and experienced a remarkable late revival through his collaboration with Damon Albarn. The 2012 album The Bravest Man in the Universe introduced his weathered voice to a younger generation and received widespread critical praise. Bobby Womack died on June 27, 2014, at the age of 70. A definitive public cause of death was not immediately announced, although he had previously faced colon cancer, diabetes, pneumonia, and a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. His life was never clean or uncomplicated, but that was exactly why the voice mattered. Bobby Womack turned regret into rhythm, survival into testimony, and every scar into a song that sounded painfully true.
David Ruffin died age 50 in 1991. David Ruffin possessed the kind of voice that could make confidence sound desperate. As one of the defining lead singers of The Temptations, he brought grit, urgency, and emotional fire to some of Motown's greatest recordings. Born Davis Eli Ruffin in Wynot, Mississippi, he grew up singing gospel before joining The Temptations in 1964. Once he stepped forward, the group's sound changed forever. His lead performance on My Girl became one of the most recognizable vocals in popular music. Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Since I Lost My Baby, and I Wish It Would Rain revealed an artist capable of turning romantic pain into something almost physical. Ruffin did not sound like a man politely asking for love. He sounded as though losing it might destroy him. Success brought attention, money, and an increasing desire for individual recognition. It also coincided with cocaine use, missed appearances, disputes within the group, and behavior that made him difficult to manage. In 1968, the Temptations dismissed him. His talent remained undeniable, but reliability had become a serious problem. Ruffin launched a solo career and achieved major success with My Whole World Ended and Walk Away from Love. Yet, addiction repeatedly disrupted the momentum. Legal difficulties, financial instability, and inconsistent performances followed him through the 1970s and 1980s. He later reunited with former Temptations members Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards. And shortly before his death, he had completed a successful tour of England. It appeared that another comeback might still be possible. That possibility ended on June 1, 1991. Ruffin collapsed after using cocaine in West Philadelphia and was taken to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, where doctors were unable to revive him. The medical examiner ruled that his death was accidental and caused by an adverse reaction to cocaine. He was 50. Early reporting surrounding his final hours became highly sensationalized. Claims that money was stolen and that he was deliberately abandoned circulated among relatives and friends. But those details were not established as the official cause or circumstances of death. They should therefore be presented as disputed, not as proven fact. David Ruffin's ending was tragic, but it must not erase the voice. Addiction took control of opportunities he had once earned. It damaged his stability and shortened his life. Yet when My Girl begins and Ruffin enters the song, none of that chaos is audible. What remains is one of soul music's most commanding voices, still pleading, still rising, and still impossible to replace. Behind the applause was an era that rarely knew how to protect its stars. Addiction was treated as scandal, weakness, or something to hide until the damage became public. Fear, shame, and industry pressure pushed extraordinary artists into silence, leaving many to fight their darkest battles far from the audiences who loved them. But their lives cannot be reduced to relapse, arrest, or loss. Their voices helped build R&B, soul, funk, and black music history. They changed how pain, love, rebellion, and survival could sound. Even when addiction wounded their lives, it could not erase the genius they gave to generations. Which story in this countdown affected you most? And which artist's music still feels impossible to let go? Drop your thoughts below, like this video, subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut, and hit the notification bell for more unvarnished stories.